we will get started. I'll start.
Okay.
Okay.
Time out. Marcia,
Yeah.
Huh?
do you have a black eye?
Do I have what?
A black eye?
Oh, I had a, it looks black. What happened was a capillary broke a week ago. And it's taking a long time for it to disappear.
Well, that's because we're older.
Right.
I'm sorry to hear that.
It just looks awful, but nothing serious.
Good.
Okay. You should see whenever anybody remarks about it, you say, "Oh, you should see the other guy."
Right.
All right. So I am starting looking at it from the second verse of the Parsha, but the first verse, 37, so it begins 37:1. If you have an Eitz Chaim Chumash, it's page 226. Anyway, so the first verse is Vayeshev Yaakov be'eretz megurei aviv be'eretz Canaan, and Jacob dwelt in the land where his father had lived, in the land of Canaan. All right, that's just setting the prologue. So, Ele toldot Yaakov Yosef ben Shiva Esrei Shana Haya Roet Echav da da da. All right, these are the generations of Jacob. When Joseph was 17 years old, being a shepherd, he was with his brothers with the flocks, and he was a lad, and was with the sons of Bilhah and with the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought evil tales about them to their father. Okay, this is a long verse. There's a lot in it. Okay, so if you are Rashi, right, what's going to stand out to you? What are you going to want to comment on? What's sort of striking here?
That they were not true brothers.
Well, they were half brothers.
Right.
Right, they were half brothers. Barnaby, you had something?
Usually, when the Bible introduces this is the line of Plony, they'd say these are the children.
Right.
But only Joseph is mentioned here.
Right. I mean, that's the most striking thing, right? I mean, these are the generations of Jacob. Joseph was 17 years old. Okay, Joseph was 17 years old. Was Joseph the only child that Jacob had? No, far from it. Right? Jacob had a bunch of children, right? He had 11 children, 11 sons and one daughter. Why is only Joseph mentioned, right? So that's like the first thing that's striking. I mean, it's striking even just on the basis of pure logic, even if it's not striking on the basis of, the way we know Genesis generally deals with genealogy, as Barnaby correctly pointed out. Okay, so that's the first glaring thing that, if we know anything about Rashi, this is something that he's going to comment on, which of course he does. All right, and he has a lot to say about this particular thing. All right. These are the generations of Jacob, their settlements and their wanderings until they came to settle, right? So Toldot, Toldot means generations, but it also means, in a certain sense, history, right? I mean, like in modern Hebrew, we say historia, okay? But it might surprise you to know that historia is not exactly a Hebrew word, right? So if you wanted to say in sort of more flowery literary Hebrew, let's say, Jewish history, Toldot Yisrael. It's not just the generation. It's not just the generations in the sense of genealogies, but it's their settlements and their wanderings. Okay, the first cause of their wanderings, when Joseph was 17 years old, etc. Through this, the events that unfolded, they wandered and descended to Egypt. Right? In other words, while it's true, I mean, well, instead of me telling you what Rashi means here, why don't you tell me what you think Rashi means here?
No comment.
In other words, right? I mean, so Joseph, I mean, Jacob had many sons, right? But what was the main thing that happened with the family of Jacob? Right? They went down to Egypt.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, we know that, right? I mean, if we were reading the Torah for the first time, we might not know that, right? But we know that, right? I mean, we know that Jacob dies in Egypt, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, the main thing that the generation of the descendants of Jacob was known for was the descent to Egypt. And the first cause, right, the cause of the descent to Egypt was Joseph, right? So even though Joseph was not the only descendant of Jacob, he was in a certain sense the most important, right? But at any rate, he was the central character in the central drama, right? I mean, absent Joseph, there's no descent into Egypt, right? And if there's no descent into Egypt, there's no Exodus, right? And there's no Moses, there's no nothing. Right, so that and as I've pointed out before, in fact, I think I said it again in my 2-minute Torah commentary for this week. Right, if you ask the average person who's familiar with the Bible, right, who is the most important character in the book of Genesis? Right? I mean, very often when I ask them, very often people say God. And I say, okay, human character, right? Who's the most important human character in the book of Genesis? There's no right answer. It's an opinion, right? But people, right? Who would you say most important human character in the book of Genesis?
For me, it's Joseph. That's the founding.
All right, Joseph, why?
Because without the story of Joseph, we don't have a future. There's no development of our faith.
Right, exactly. Right. Without the story of Joseph is the linchpin, right, on which hangs everything else that happens subsequent in the entire Chumash, right? I mean, you could say that about Abraham too, right? If Abraham hadn't been the founder of monotheism, the founder of our people, none of that would have also, right? I mean, but the point is, I mean, as I pointed out, the Joseph saga is 4 parshiot, right? Abraham gets 3 parshiot, right? Isaac gets almost nothing, right? And Jacob gets very little. And much of what Jacob gets is in the context of the Joseph story, right? But the Joseph story is 4 parshiot. That's a lot. It's really, it's pretty central, right? So through this, the events that unfolded, they wandered and descended to Egypt. This is according to the plain explanation of the verse, putting everything's in its promise, in its proper perspectives, right? Zehu achar pshuto shel mikra liot davar dibur el ofnav, right? The pshat is like the plain contextual meaning, right? The unmidrashified meaning, right? But the midrash says a few things, right? Scripture bases the generations of Jacob on Joseph because of many things, right? One is that with his entire being, Jacob served Lavan for Rachel, and Rachel bore Joseph, right? I mean, in other words, right, he served Lavan for 14 years, right? But, and you could say, well, 7 for Leah and 7 for Rachel, right? But it's not 7 for Leah and 7 for Rachel, because the 7 that he wound up serving for Leah, he thought he was serving for Rachel, right? And then 7 more for Rachel, and Rachel is the mother of Joseph. Okay, so that's the first reason, is that like Jacob went through everything that he went through with Lavan for the sake of Joseph. Okay, that's the first thing. Okay, in addition, Joseph's features resembled Jacob's, and whatever happened to Jacob happened to Joseph. Now I'm going to look at the Hebrew for this, because there's some very interesting language, okay, which you can immediately tell is rabbinic Hebrew and not biblical Hebrew, okay? It's, let me tell you what line it is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The 8th line that begins with Birachel. All right, you see it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So Yaakov lo avad etzel Lavan ela berachel. The line before, Jacob served Lavan for Rachel. Shehaush v'shehaya ziv ikunin shel Yosef domelo. Okay, Joseph's, the Hebrew phrase is ziv. Ziv means splendor. Ziv ikunin resembled Jacob. Okay, is there a familiar word that you see in that phrase? Ikunin. Don't think Hebrew. Think Greek.
Oh.
Don't speak Greek.
Icon. Icon. Right?
Oh.
What is an icon? An icon is an image. An icon is an image. Okay? The splendor of Joseph's image was the same as Jacob's. Ziv ikunin. Okay? So this is I just, because I'm interested in language. Okay? This is a rabbinic loan word from the Greek. Okay? And this phrase Ziv ikunin is used fairly frequently in rabbinic literature. Barnaby, I don't know if you've ever seen it before, but it's not rare. Okay, but it is clear. I mean, so the minute you see a Greek loan word, first of all, you know that it has to be rabbinic Hebrew, not biblical Hebrew, right? But also, if you have loan words it means they were conversant with the culture, right? I mean, they were Hellenized Jews, at least to some extent, right? They knew some Greek, or they wouldn't have brought the word ikunin into Hebrew. Okay. V'chol masha irali Yaakov irali Yosef. Everything that happened to Jacob happened to Joseph. All right? In other words, Maseh avot siman lebanim. Whatever happens to the parents is a sign for the children. Right? So like Joseph was Jacob's mini-me in a certain way, right? Everything that happened to Joseph happened to Jacob, right? Zenistam v'zenistam. They were both hated, right? They were both hated. Ze achiv mevakesh lehorgo, v'ze echav mevakshim lehorgo. One, his brother sought to kill him, right? That is Jacob. His brother Esau sought to kill him. And the other, Joseph, all of his brothers sought to kill him, right? So they resembled each other. They were hated. Their brothers sought to kill them. Likewise, many other similarities, okay? Now, this last thing, I'm going to skip a little bit, but down to the last 7 sentences or so, the last 5 sentences and 1 word in the Hebrew. Va'od nidrash bo v'yeshev bikesh Yaakov le'shev b'shalva. All right, it is said he dwelt. Okay, that's the first verse. All right, Vayeshev. To dwell, leshevet, right, or leshev, means tranquil. Okay, right? Hine matovu manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Right? So, like, yeshev means it's a tranquil dwelling, okay, as opposed to lagur, which is not necessarily tranquil. Okay, so Jacob, all he wants to do is dwell in tranquility, and when he just when he thinks he's going to have tranquility, what happens to him? Kafatz alav rogzel shel Yosef. The troubles of Joseph sprang upon him. Tzadikim mivakshim leshev b'shalva. When the righteous want to dwell in tranquility, Omer HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God says, what is prepared for the righteous in the world to come is not sufficient for them. They seek also to dwell in tranquility in this world. Okay, it's an expression of astonishment, right? In other words, you understand what Rashi is saying here? In other words, God was mad at Jacob, right? God was mad at Jacob because he sought to dwell in tranquility. And God says, "Oh, you're ungrateful. You're ungrateful, right? You should be happy with the fact that you're going to enjoy tranquility in the Olam Haba, right? You're going to enjoy tranquility in the afterlife. That should be enough for you, right? What chutzpah you have that you seek to have tranquility in this life as well. Okay, so, just when he thought he had tranquility, right? Just when he thought the kids are all out of the house, right? I can dwell in peace, right? Everything, right? Just when you thought it was safe to go back in the water,
Whoops.
right? just when you thought, you were going to enjoy a little peace and quiet in your old age, that's when all the tsuris with Joseph starts. Okay, what do you say about this?
All
right, did you hear what Barnaby said?
No.
It's contrived. Right? I mean, it's bad theology, right? I mean, if you were in my theology class last week, right, you would now, of course, Rashi is entitled to be Rashi, but I think it's very bad theology, right? Now, it might be, I don't know exactly what was going on in Rashi's life or Rashi's community at the time that he wrote this, right? It could be, but it's essentially a form of theodicy, right? Justification of God, right? In other words, right? In other words, right? So as I mentioned in the theology class last week, Harold Kushner wrote "When Bad Things Happen to Good People." Right, and the title of that book is perhaps the most misquoted title of any book in the history of books, because many people say why bad things happen to good people, right? But this is exactly Rashi's why bad things happen to good people, right? Why do bad things happen to good people? Because you expect that they shouldn't. Right? And so for the chutzpah of expecting that things shouldn't go bad for you, you should say, thank God I'm a tzaddik, and I'm going to enjoy tranquility in the olam haba, and you shouldn't seek tranquility in olam hazeh, right? So nobody gets to retire from the shul board, right? No, right? You don't get to enjoy tranquility in this world, because you're going to enjoy it in the next. Okay, and if you think that you're going to enjoy it in this world as well, God has another thing coming. Okay, I don't like this at all.
No.
I don't like it at all. I'm not endorsing it. I'm just, bringing it at it, b'shem omro, in the name of the one who said it. Okay, next page. V'hu na'ar, he was a lad. Shahaya oseh ma'aseh ne'arut, he behaved childishly. Mitaken b'saro mimashmesh be'enav kadeshia nirei yafeh. He behaved childly. He was fixing his hair and touching up his eyes so that he would appear handsome. Right? Which, it's interesting. I mean, if you saw Joseph in the Technicolor Dreamcoat, right, where Joseph was played by Donny Osmond, right, then very young, a teen idol. And this is exactly, I don't know, maybe Andrew Lloyd Webber and Donny Osmond got their vision of the young Joseph from Rashi, right? But he behaved, in other words, he was very concerned with his appearance, right? He was very concerned with his appearance. He always fixed his hair, touching up his eyes so that he would look nice. Okay, so this is something that of which Rashi does not approve. Okay. But now we come to something which Rashi does approve. So he was a lad with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah. Okay? I mean, Rashi only says Bilhah, but the verse says he was a lad with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah. Okay, now, without looking at the comment, why is this something that Rashi is going to comment on?
Where were the other brothers?
Right. Exactly, right? Jacob has children from 4 women.
Right.
Leah, Rachel, Bilhah, and Zilpah, right? But it says Joseph was a lad with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah. What about the sons of Leah?
Right.
Where are they? Where are they? Okay. So Rashi says, meaning that he was frequently with the sons of Bilhah and sons of Zilpah, I guess, right, who are daughters of the Shfachot, the handmaidens, right? Although the verse says, right, B'nai Bilhah, B'nai Zilpah, Neshei Aviv, his women, his father's wives, right? So this verse calls Bilhah and Zilpah Jacob's wives, right? But
Right.
in other places, they're called slaves or servants or handmaidens, right?
Handmaidens.
Right? Well, I mean, handmaidens is not English. I mean, shifcha, you know, concepts in the biblical world are not one-to-one identical with concepts in, later eras. So shifcha could be handmaiden. I don't know. What is even a handmaiden, right? I don't even know what a handmaiden
Servant,
really
in a way, a concubine.
concubine, right? And they're also called pilegesh. They're also called concubines, right? But a shifcha is not merely a servant, right? In that sense, a shifcha is a slave, right? They are property. They are bought and sold. They are given. They are assigned, right? And that's exactly what happened, right?
Yeah.
Bilhah and
Right.
Zilpah were the shfachot of Lavan, and he gave one to each of his daughters when they married Jacob, right? And then they were used as sort of surrogate, not exactly surrogates, but you know what I mean. But right, so but why does the verse say he was a lad with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah? Because he used to hang out with them, because the other brothers would demean them while he acted friendly with them, right? I mean, in other words, right, the sons of Leah would say, "Oh, you're second class. Your children, we're children of a wife, you're children of a concubine, you're children of a slave, you're not on the same level as us," right? They would, but Joseph, he was the guy who always was friendly to, the kids who were made fun of, the kids who had to eat lunch by themselves, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, you can see this, right? You can see this in contemporary life today in schools, right? How there are kids who are either bullied or made fun of because of their origin, right? And then there are other kids who reach out to them, right? So Joseph was the one who reached out to them, to the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, but he was not so nice to his other half-brothers, the sons of Leah, right? He would bring them evil tales, et dibatam ra'ah, bad reports of them, okay? And if you look at our commentary, Eitz Chaim, the content of the reports is not given. This is the first of several causes of simmering enmity between Joseph and his brothers, right? But at any rate, even according to the pshat of the text, without any commentary, he was a tattletale. Right? He was a tattletale, and they didn't like him.
Right.
Right? But Rashi says every bad thing that he saw in his brothers, the sons of Leah, he would tell his father. Okay? What were those things? That they ate limbs from living animals. All right? Ever min hachai. Okay, now this whole idea of ever min hachai is, according to the rabbis, one of the Sheva mitzvot b'nei Noach, right? One of the 7 commandments that all humanity is supposed to observe. You're not allowed to eat flesh that was torn from a living animal. Okay, now, we might say, how common is that, right? But even Gentiles are not allowed to do that. And apparently sometimes, I mean, I don't eat crustaceans, so I don't know, but apparently crustaceans are sometimes either eaten live or chopped up while they're still alive and then eaten, and so on and so forth. Okay, forget the fact that they're crustaceans and we as Jews aren't allowed to eat them. Right? According to halakha, Gentiles aren't allowed to eat them either. I mean, I'm not sure that there are too many Gentiles. Oh, I would love that crab, but it was chopped up while it was still alive, so even though I'm a goy, it's treif for me. You know, but there are. I mean, there are people who consider themselves Noahites. Right? There aren't that many, and it's eccentric, but there are some, right? But ever min hachai is something that is forbidden to all humanity. So even if you say, well, this is pre-Sinai and they didn't have to keep kosher and da-da-da-da-da, they still had to observe ever min hachai because that was given to Noah, right? Several generations earlier. Now, just as an aside, right, lest you think that this is some obscure prohibition, when I taught on this, I guess it was last year, I don't think I went into it because it's complicated, but if you remember, I gave a talk last year, a Kiddush conversation about lab-grown meat. Right?
About what?
Lab-grown meat.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, I remember.
Cultured meat. We're not talking about like Beyond Burgers or Impossible Burgers, which are plant products that are, you know, designed to resemble meat, but we're talking about meat that was grown in a laboratory, right, which is replicated actual animal cells. Mm-hmm. Okay, and one of the things that Rabbi Nevins deals with in his responsum is the question of ever min hachai, because in many of the technologies that are used, the original genetic material, okay, which is infinitesimal, right? It's infinitesimal. It's a handful of cells, right? But they're often taken from living animals, right?
Tissue culture.
What?
Tissue culture. That's how cells.
Culture, right? Tissue culture, exactly. It's tissue culture. It's precisely tissue culture. But the original tissue is taken from a living animal.
Correct.
Right? And right. I mean, you certainly know more about the technological end of it, the scientific end, than I do, because I know nothing about it, right? But the halachic question is, if it starts with tissue that was taken from a living animal, is it ever min hachai? Because if it's ever min hachai, it's treif. Mm-hmm. I mean, treif, not only for Jews, but even for Gentiles, right? Which, again, I don't know too many Gentiles say, oh, this is treif for me, right? But it would also mean that a Jew couldn't sell it, right? Like right now, I mean, is it a problem for a Jew to be a butcher who sells pork? It's not. It's not. There's absolutely no prohibition on selling pork to Gentiles because they're allowed to eat pork, right? And if they're allowed to eat pork, you're allowed to sell them pork, right? Gentiles are also not allowed to eat ever min hachai right? And if Gentiles are not allowed to eat ever min hachai, you're not allowed to sell them ever min hachai.
Right.
So if we conclude that, the original genetic material, which starts off the whole culture, is ever min hachai, then the whole technology is not permissible, right?
Interesting. Yeah.
So ever min hachai is, I was going to say a live issue, but that's almost like a bad pun, right? But it is an issue that still has contemporary application and is growing more. Okay, so that's the first thing, right? That Joseph saw that they ate ever min hachai, and he went to tell his dad, "Oh, they're eating ever min hachai." Right? They demean the sons of the handmaids by calling them slaves. Okay, and right, which takes us back to the previous Rashi, right? Which is why he would spend time with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah. And 3, they were suspected of illicit sexual relationships. Okay, so for these 3 tales, he was punished, right? And it's a measure for measure, right? It's midah keneged midah, right? He tattled on his brothers for ever min hachai, right? They slaughtered a kid when they sold him and did not eat it alive, right? Why? Right? Remember, why did they slaughter a kid after they sold him?
They needed the blood.
They need blood.
He used the blood so they could bring his garment back to Jacob, and you see, we're not sure what happened to Joseph, but we found his bloody coat, right? So, but they they slaughtered it. They didn't eat it alive, right? For the report that he told about them that they called their brothers slaves, Joseph was sold as a slave. And concerning the illicit sexual relationships that he told about them, his master's wife lifted her eyes, etc. Right? So that, there's this measure for measure, right? Every bad thing. Now, Rashi, by the way, is not, well, for the first and the third, they're only suspected, right? I mean, there's no actual evidence that they ate ever min hachai. Well, and even for the second, there's no actual evidence that they did any of these things, although Rashi assumes, right, in the previous commentary that they did this business of calling their other brothers slaves, right? Okay, so we don't have to do the very next Rashi. I want to go down to verse 4.
Okay.
Right? V'yiru ahav ki oto ahav avihem mikol echav yisneu oto v'lo yachlu dabro l'shalom. His brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, and they hated him, and they could not speak with him peacefully. Okay, below Yachlu Dabro L'Shalom. So the first, I guess the question, because, right, Rashi's commenting on that, but, right, they could not speak peacefully to him, is that, why is that necessary? Right, if they hated him, right, the verse just told us that they hated him, right? So if they hated him, obviously they couldn't speak peacefully to him. Right? I mean, you don't speak peacefully to somebody that you hate, right? What's the point of telling us this? It's superfluous knowledge. No, it's not. Mitoch genutam limdanu shivcham. From what is stated to their discredit, we may learn something to their credit. Shelo dibru achat bafei ve'achat belev. They did not say one thing with their mouth and think differently in their heart. Okay? Right? What is Rashi saying here?
He's saying that
they weren't hypocrites.
Right.
Right? At least they weren't hypocrites.
Hypocrites.
Right? They hated him. And they let him know that they hated him. right? They didn't pretend to speak nicely to him when they really hated him.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and you know, I mean, it's funny in a way. It's funny in a way, but I have to tell you, you know, I mean, and maybe this is not a good thing that I'm saying about myself, right? But in my career as a rabbi, right, I have had congregants who I know for a fact, right, were trying to undermine me, right, and yet would be pleasant and full of praise when they were talking to me, right? I'm not talking about here, all right, lest you start thinking, oh, who is the rabbi talking about, right? I'm talking about in a previous congregation, right? And there are few things that are more infuriating. There are few things that are more infuriating. If you hate me, you know, at least be honest about it, right? Don't, you know, don't have your mouth filled with honey when behind my back you're deploying your stinger.
Right.
Right? I mean, so at least they weren't hypocrites, right? They hated Joseph and they let him know that they hated him. They didn't pretend. They didn't pretend to like him, but really hated him. Okay, so now he has this dream, right? He has this dream. He told them this dream. We were binding sheaves in the field when suddenly my sheaf stood up and remained upright. Then your sheaves gathered around and bowed low to my sheaf. His brothers answered, do you mean to reign over us? Do you mean to rule over us? And they hated him even more for his talk about his dreams. He dreamed another dream and told it to his brothers, saying, look, I've had another dream, and this time the sun, the moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me. And when he told it to his father and brothers, his father berated him. What he said to him is, this dream you have dreamed, are we to come, I and your mother and your brothers, and bow low to you to the ground? Okay. Now, verse 10, before we look at Rashi, what's noticeable, you know, linguistically or narratively about this verse? All right, so in verse 9, he dreamed another dream and told it to his brothers. All right, verse 10, when he told it to his father and brothers, his father berated him.
Okay.
Right? So Barnaby.
Brothers is mentioned twice.
Brothers is mentioned twice.
Right, yeah.
Right? He told it to his brothers. He told it to his fathers and to his brothers. So that's the first thing, right? That's kind of unusual. Does this mean that he told it to his brothers twice? Right? I mean, not bad enough that he tells it to them once, but he has to tell it to them twice, right? The second thing, all right, will we come, I, your mother, and your brothers, to prostrate ourselves to you to the ground? Okay, why is that problematic? Who is Joseph's mother?
Rachel, and she's gone.
Right, she's already dead.
Yes.
Right, so obviously, right, in other words, if Joseph is saying this dream is a portent of the future, right? Jacob's upset, right? But he's saying what? You know, I and your mother and your brothers are supposed to bow down to you, right? Well, his mother for sure can't bow down,
Right.
because she already dead, right? So this is a problem. Okay, So let's look at Rashi. V'yisaper el aviv ve'el echav. He told his father and his brothers. La'achar shesiper oto le'echav chazar v'sipro la'aviv bifneihem. After he told it to his brothers, he told it again to his father in their presence. Okay, so yes, he's told it now to his brothers twice. Right? Okay, so that's the first thing. His father rebuked him because he was bringing hatred upon himself. Okay, now, this is an interesting question, right? I mean, do people ever bring hatred upon themselves? Right? No, I mean, I think it's an honest question. I will tell you that I have had discussions, let's say, with rabbinic colleagues who were very upset at the fact that the people leading the impeachment hearings were who? Schiff and Nadler.
Jews.
Two Jews, right? And the counsel for the committee was Goldman, a Jew, right? And the panel that the Judiciary Committee had of law professors, right? The one law professor who defended Trump, Irish. The three law professors who said Trump deserved impeachment, Jews. Okay? And what the argument is, forget the merits of the case, right? And notice, I am not talking anything about the merits of the case, okay, because it's irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Why does it always have to be Jews, right? There are all these millions of people who love him, and who are the ones trying to bring him down? Jews, right? We're causing anti-Semitism, right? My response is no. The only thing that Jews do to cause anti-Semitism is exist,
Mm-hmm.
right? Is exist. If we didn't exist, maybe there wouldn't be anti-Semitism, right? But we don't cause anti-Semitism, right? Anti-Semites cause anti-Semitism,
Mm-hmm.
right? But here, I don't know, is it fair for Jacob to rebuke Joseph because he's bringing hatred upon himself?
I say yes, because there wasn't any, unless you're one of those people in the camp that says, your birth determines, your faction, your enmity, and being the sons of different mothers automatically cause them to be enemies. Joseph's own actions have demonstrated a lot of arrogance and haughtiness, and
Yeah, I can't hear.
Okay, let me see if I can I'll bring it a little closer.
So,
can you hear? Is this better?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, this isn't an issue of like inherent qualities, unless you believe that by virtue of being born from different mothers, they're automatically, automatically hate each other. Joseph's actions, through these verses demonstrate, arrogance and haughtiness and
Mm-hmm.
towards his brothers, and even the commentary reinforces that. Even though they try to say, "Oh yeah," even though the commentary says they weren't exactly clean themselves.
Mm-hmm.
When Joseph constantly points that out, and he's trying to put himself in a position above, how else can you expect his brothers to react?
I agree.
Right. I mean, yeah. The question is, in my counseling or educator role, right? I tell people it's okay to hate what people do. It's not okay to hate people, right? Does anybody really live that way?
Of course not.
Of course, right? I certainly don't, right? I certainly don't. There are people that I hate. But if you were to ask me, you know, is it right to hate? No, you know, it's like last week, right, when Nancy Pelosi was asked by that reporter, do you hate Donald Trump? Right? And her answer, and I don't know if it's true or not, okay? I can't enter into her heart, right? But her answer, you know, I know enough about Catholic theology, right? And actually, one of her nephews was a classmate, not only a classmate, a friend of mine at Georgetown, right? She said, I don't hate anybody, right? We are taught to have hearts full of love. I don't hate anybody, right? I hate what he's doing, right? I don't like what he's doing, but I don't hate him, right? Theologically, I think that is a proper thing to say, right? But you know, it's difficult, and I will tell you, you know, I mean, again, from my own counseling experience, right, is that you have a family with more than one kid, right? And one of the kids is problematic, and they do problematic things, right? Is that therefore okay for the other siblings to hate their sibling? No, they shouldn't, right? They should hate what they do, right? And the whole question of Joseph, I mean, Joseph certainly seems to lack empathy and lack the ability to understand how his actions impact others, right? And very recently, within the modern Orthodox community, there's a big controversy because a well-respected modern Orthodox biblical scholar wrote a monograph suggesting that Joseph was on the autism spectrum.
Oh boy.
Okay. Well, but if you look at his behaviors, it could well be.
It could well be.
You know, it's hard for me to say because I don't believe we're necessarily talking about historical figures, right? But he lacks the ability, right? One of the things that is a sign of being on the autism spectrum, right, is an inability to both read and anticipate how your words and actions will affect other people, right? And he seems totally lacking in that regard, right? So even though, you know, his father rebuked, said, you know, look at what you're doing, right? You're making your brothers hate you. Did it help?
No.
It did not help, right? Okay. So, last thing we'll look at. Will we come? Right? Will we come, you know, your mother and your brothers to prostrate ourselves to you to the ground? Isn't your mother Rachel already dead? But he, Jacob, did not know that the matter referred to Bilhah, who had raised Joseph as if she were his mother. Right? So that when that Joseph did intend to imply that his father and his mother would bow down to him, right? But by mother, he didn't mean Rachel, because he knows his biological mother is dead, right? He means Bilhah, right? Who raised him after Rachel's death. Okay? But Jacob doesn't realize this. Okay? The rabbis, however, derive from here that there is no dream without meaningless components. Okay, which I find this a fascinating comment, right? Because obviously, you know, in the Bible, right, in the Bible and in later rabbinic thought, and certainly in even today contemporary Hasidic thought, dreams are divine communications, right? That is how God communicates with the overwhelming majority of human beings, right? I mean, the overwhelming majority in the Torah, everybody now,
Yeah.
because there's no more prophecy, right? So God's communication is in dreams. But having said that, right, so a dream may be God's communication, but it's still a dream,
Mm-hmm.
right? And there is no dream without meaningless components, right?
Yeah.
So, which I mean is fascinating because, you know, what it means is that even I mean, assume that this is true, right? Assume both things. Dreams are God's communication, right? But also every dream has random meaningless components, right? What is the practical impact of that? Just because you have a dream doesn't mean that it's from God.
Right.
Right? It could be from God or it could be just meaningless stuff, because every dream has meaningless stuff also. Right? Which makes it, which, you know, as the recipient of the dream, that's a little disconcerting. Right? But for the stability of the system, it's actually a good thing. Right? Because, you know, I can't come to the ritual committee and say, God has told me that this is what we should do. Right? And they say, well, Rabbi, how do you know that God told you that this is what we should do? Because it came to me in a dream. Okay, well, but every dream also has nonsense mixed into it. Right? So maybe we're not going to deny that you had that dream, not going to deny that God communicates with us in dreams, but there's also nonsense in dreams.
Yeah.
Right?
Except,
so how do we, what?
Except at that time, that dreams were people. You know, this comes again. You know, through the Torah, like with the Pharaoh's dreams, people took dreams very seriously in ancient culture.
Right, of course they did, and that, you know, and that gets back to Joseph being on the spectrum, lacking empathy, right? When he tells, I forget which is the one who's going to have it be hanged, right? There was the baker and the cupbearer.
Okay,
right?
I can't remember suddenly.
Right, but one of them, right? What? The cupbearer is the one who was, right? He doesn't say, oh, I hate to tell you this, right? Yeah. Or, you know, I'm really sorry. No, he says,
he just says it.
You're going to get your job back. You're going to be hanged.
Right, yeah.
Right? No empathy, no nothing, right? Again, now, part of the controversy within the Orthodox community is the assumption that by saying about Joseph that he was on the autism spectrum, that's an insult, right? And the problem is with people who think that's an insult, because it's not. It's not. You know, it's neurodiversity.
Yeah.
It's neurodiversity. There's nothing wrong with being on the autism spectrum, right? Now, certainly can make people's lives difficult. Right. And people have to learn how to cope, et cetera, right? But, you know, I mean, some of the most successful people in contemporary American society, right? Steve Jobs was on the autism spectrum. Bill Gates is on the spectrum. Didn't prevent them from being very successful, fulfilling, you know, et cetera, right? So that's part of the problem. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you at shul. Keep warm.
Okay.
Good night.
Good night.